In Argentina, the Ministry of Health has urgently approved the use of Sputnik V coronavirus vaccine. U.S. President Donald Trump granted pardons to mercenaries and several of his Republican associates. In Ethiopia, over 100 people have been killed in ethnic conflicts. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. In Argentina, the Ministry of Health has urgently approved the use of the Sputnik V coronavirus vaccine. The Argentine government authorized the use of the antidote after the National Direction of Control of Non-Communicable Illnesses certified the clinical warranties of it. It is expected that at least 300,000 doses will arrive to the country on Thursday, December 24th, to start the vaccination operation. The day before, the National Administration of Medicines, Food and Medical Technology approved the vaccine developed by the American laboratory Pfizer. The public body reviewed that the antidote presents an acceptable balance of benefits and risk and authorized the inscription of the vaccine to the registry of medicinal specialties of the country. The Mexican government confirmed the beginning of the vaccination process against COVID-19 for Thursday. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador made the announcement during a news brief this Wednesday. The vaccination process will first be targeted to health workers in Mexico and also surrounding regions. López pointed out that less than 1 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine arrive in the country, also saying that he requested 34 million more in the near future from the U.S. company. In Peru, farm workers continue to take to the streets to demand the repeal of the Agrarian Promotion Law and have called a national strike for December 29th. Farm workers maintain blockades in various sections along the southern Pan-American Highway in the midst of police deployment. This happens after the Congress failed to approve the substitute text that proposed a new agrarian labor regime. Demonstrators have been demanding better wages and respect for the rights as producers. Several spokespersons of the farmer movement have expressed that the sector is one of the most precarious in the country because of the previous law of agrarian promotion only favors the agro-export entrepreneurs to the detriment of the interests of the rural workers. Russia and Colombia face diplomatic discord after the government of Colombia confirmed this Tuesday the expulsion of 2 Russian diplomats who allegedly were carrying out spying work in the South American nation, and in response, Russia decreed as persona non grata 2 Colombian diplomats on their national territory. The Russian diplomats, identified as Alexander Nikolaevich and Alexander Paristov, attached to the Russian Military Intelligence Service and the Foreign Intelligence Service, had been expelled on December the 8th. According to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Claudia Blum, the alleged spies had a structured and highly organized plan. As a response for these actions, the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs informed through this website that it declared as persona non grata 2 employees of the diplomatic representation of Colombia in Moscow. According to a statement on December 22nd, Colombia's ambassador to the Russian Federation, Alfonso López Caballero, was summoned to the foreign minister to protest the Colombian side's unfounded decision to expel 2 diplomats from the Russian representation in Bogotá. And the head of the peace delegation of Colombia's National Liberation Army, Pablo Beltrán, gave an interview to our channel in which he spoke about his work in Havana since the peace talks broke down and reiterated his intentions to resume talks with the national government.
In Colombia, there has been a great deal of social pressure to respect and develop the peace process, and we as the ELN Dialogue Delegation have participated in this defense of the process, and we have told the government that we are willing to resume talks, and of course to respect what was agreed with the previous government.
Pablo Beltrán affirmed that the pressure exerted by the Colombian society and the international community creates the hope of retaking dialogues and concretizing a peace process in Colombia.
It is 2 different things. What makes Colombia viable is peace, not war. Therefore, this is the path that Colombia will take in the next few years, and this implies that any agreement signed be implemented and be fulfilled. That is what Colombian society demands, meaning that those agreements do not fall on deaf ears, and governments will only fulfill this with a strong pressure from society, and we are working so that pressure for the development of agreements, for the development of the process, and for the fulfillment of the agreements, and that we continue to build on what has already been built. And that is our hope.
A scientific research group identified a new strain of COVID-19 in the Brazilian state of Rio de Janeiro, one of the most affected regions by the pandemic. The research was presented by the National Laboratory of Scientific Computing linked to the Ministry of Science and Technology and carried out jointly with the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. These studies confirmed that the new strain was discovered last October and is so far partially controlled. The city of Rio registers the highest number of COVID-19 infections and fatalities. Scientists have so far discovered 5 mutations of the virus after the study of 180 COVID-19 genomes. However, they cannot point out if this new mutation will be more aggressive or could reduce the effectiveness of the vaccines that are starting to be distributed. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Donald Trump, in one of his last actions as the U.S. president, pardoned the mercenaries who killed 14 civilians in Iraq and several of his Republican associates. The outgoing president pardoned 20 people, including 2 convicted after Robert Mueller's special investigation, 3 former Republican congressmen implicated in a corruption, and 4 contractors of the private military company Blackwater, implicated in the murder of 14 civilians in Iraq in 2007. One of them, Nicholas Sladen, was serving a life sentence. The highest profile pardon is that of George Papadopoulos, who was a foreign affairs advisor to the Trump campaign in 2016 and who pled guilty to lying to federal agents as part of the investigation into the Russian scheme led by Mueller. The outgoing president also pardoned Alex van der Zwaan, a lawyer who pled guilty to the same charges as Papadopoulos. Iraqis reacted on Wednesday after the U.S. President Donald Trump pardoned 4 former government contractors convicted in a 2007 massacre in Baghdad and caused an international uproar over the use of private security guards in a war zone.
The infamous Blackwater company killed citizens at Nisour Square. Today we heard they were released upon a personal order by U.S. President Donald Trump, as if they don't care for spilled Iraqi blood. We call on the United Nations, the international community, and human rights organizations to immediately intervene and condemn these killers. In my opinion, the U.S. President is not obliged to issue such a decision in his last 2 or 3 months in office. He does not have to do that. It seems the political side prevailed over the legal and judicial side in this decision. President Trump was supposed to consider the relationship with Iraq, especially since Iraq has a strategic cooperation agreement with the U.S. in all fields. So this will affect Trump's political situation and his legacy.
And scuffles broke out between drivers waiting to get to France from the UK and police as frustration boiled over. Many of the drivers have been waiting for 3 days or 4, even there, and they are desperate to get home for Christmas. They had expected COVID-19 testing to be rolled out, but they have not seen anything. Meanwhile, the drivers have blocked all roads to the port to demonstrate against their plight. Rail, air and sea services between the UK and France resumed Wednesday after France eased its travel ban. But passengers need a negative COVID-19 test to travel, and earlier this morning there was no sign of any testing being performed in Dover.
People are frustrating here. We are, there is shouting. The people are scared in the vans. The question is, it really must be happen something here to somebody in the top will decide, hey, we need to speed it up, we need to do tests now, immediately, to release them. How the people from the airport will get to the ferry?
As soon as we knew that the French government allowed French people to get back with a COVID negative test, we rushed to do a COVID negative test, and then we came here. We even booked a ferry ticket for 4 a.m., but no ferry is going since 4 a.m. We've been stuck here.
The Greek Health Ministry announced that vaccinations in the country are expected to start from Sunday. The ministry also said that Greece will receive the first 9,000 vaccines on Saturday. The vaccination program will coincide with the National Health Organization's continued COVID rapid testing. To this date, Greece registers more than 133,000 COVID-19 cases.
I want to inform you that the Ilion Health Center was established in a very short time. It covers 3 vaccination centers, which will start operating each with a separate doctor, a nurse, and a visiting healthcare professional who will do the vaccination. There will be a doctor who will take down the patient's medical history. We will ask some questions to see if the person has a history regarding a previous vaccination, and we will proceed with his vaccination. Once this process, which takes about 10 to 15 minutes, is over, another 15 minutes will follow in a waiting room so we can see if the person presents any allergic reaction.
Moldovan Prime Minister Ion Cicu announced his resignation on Wednesday, paving the way for early parliamentary elections.
There are only 2 legal ways to trigger the dissolution of the parliament and to organize snap parliamentary elections. One of them is the resignation of the government. Under these circumstances, we talked today and I propose what I'm going to do, to propose the resignation of the Prime Minister and, accordingly, the government of the Republic of Moldova. Starting tomorrow, the newly elected president who will take the oath must take full responsibility for what is happening in the country and begin negotiations with parliamentary factions to form a new government, nominating a candidate for Prime Minister.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. More than 100 people have been killed in Ethiopia's western region of Benishangul Gumuz as ethnic tensions challenge the agenda of a national unity in a country with more than 80 ethnic groups. The attack occurred a day after the Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, visited the region and spoke about the need to bring to justice those responsible for the recent attacks. The desire by enemies to divide Ethiopia along ethnic and religious lines still exists. This desire will remain unfulfilled. Abiy tweeted on Tuesday along with photographs of his meeting that a day in the town of Metekel. The attacks are separate from the deadly conflict in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region, where Ethiopian forces and allied regional forces began fighting Tigray regional forces early November. The most recent previous attack in the area was on 14 November, when gunmen targeted a bus and killed 34 people. The United Nations said Wednesday the Central African Republic's 4th largest town, which was seized by rebels Tuesday ahead of elections this weekend, is back on the hands of United Nations peacekeepers and national security forces. The rebel attacks followed government accusations at the weekend that former President François Bozizé was plotting a coup with armed groups ahead of a presidential and legislative elections next Sunday. At the nation's request, Russia and Rwanda sent hundreds of military personnel to support the troubled country. UN peacekeepers patrol the capital of the Central African Republic, where the elections are due to be held. The country has long been plagued by insecurity, and it's estimated that armed groups control some 2/3 of the national territory. And Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Wednesday that Russia's response to the recent round of U.S. sanctions against it will be forthcoming.
We are not surprised by these sanctions. The US has long practiced hostile politics towards our country, and of course, our answer to the sanctions will be forthcoming, not only in a mirror or asymmetric way, but we will take further measures that will impact the entire scope of US-Russia relations. These actions by Washington show the strategic course of the United States as attempting to weaken its competitors on global markets as much as possible and instill the methods of unfair competition in flagrant violation of the norms of the World Trade Organization.
Thousands of people took to the streets of Yerevan demanding the Armenian Prime Minister's resignation over his handling of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict with Azerbaijan. Opposition politicians and their supporters have been calling for Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan to step down for weeks since he signed a peace deal that halted 44 days of deadly fighting at the cost of territorial concessions to Azerbaijan. Crowds of protesters gathered near government buildings in Yerevan, chanting "Nikol, go away." Several hours into the rally, opposition supporters erected tents of Yerevan's main square. The Prime Minister defended the deal as a painful but necessary move that prevented Azerbaijan from overrunning the entire Nagorno-Karabakh region. China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian said Wednesday some U.S. politicians are blatantly spreading false information about Chinese companies' bid for Pacific Undersea Cable project to smear China and suppress the company.
The U.S. senators you just mentioned are anti-China on all fronts. They are fond of getting lies to slander China and serve their political self-interests, so they have no political integrity to speak of. Their remarks are completely slanders against the Chinese companies and fabricated excuses for the U.S. to unreasonably suppress Chinese high-tech companies. The Chinese government has all along encouraged Chinese enterprises to carry out foreign investment and cooperation in accordance with market principles and international rules and on the basis of abiding by local laws and regulations. It is precisely the U.S. that since the exposure of the Prism Gate incident has carried out large-scale cyber theft in countries around the world, including its allies, making itself worthy of the name of the empire of hackers and cyber theft. Not long ago, Danish media exposed the relevant US agencies were monitoring Danish government departments and collecting private data and information via the Danish communication cable. Everyone can clearly see through the US tricks of slandering others and beautifying itself.
And recent satellite imagery suggested that one of the world's largest icebergs has, as predicted, grounded out to the oceanic shelf and begun to break up. As a consequence of the water flow surrounding it, a large section of the South Georgia Spoon iceberg A68A broke off. Approximately the size of a small island, the iceberg is significant enough for it to be labeled as 68D. Currently, the iceberg is roughly 30 nautical miles away from South Georgia. With the backdrop of South Georgia mountains, the new iceberg is an impressive yet potentially hazardous addition to the scenery. The true nature of the threat of this iceberg to the wildlife haven of South Georgia is still being assessed and will attract ongoing interest from the Antarctic scientific community during its journey. Further monitoring of a A68D will determine whether it's stationary on the shelf or continuing around the island. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.